Romania, Saint of the Mary Jane, has honestly become one of my favourite bosses in not just the DLC, but the bloody main game as well. The design is top tier, and the fight itself is just absolutely incredible. But upon defeating her in the rotten hotbox we find her in, I've seen a lot of people actually say the lore is lacklustre. Nobody is denying the fact it's one of From Software's most creative bosses, but a lot of people are saying it has no lore to back it up. And in my opinion, I think that's absolute octopus spunk. And in today's video, we're going to be discussing everything she has to offer, from her amazing lore to some very much hidden secrets you might have missed. It turns out a very small percentage of the people that watch these videos are actually subscribed, and I'm not going to ask you to subscribe right now, as personally I think that's very silly, but at the end of this video, if you have enjoyed, please consider leaving a like and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel and it lets me know you're enjoying this style of content and do want to see more. But without any more dilly-daddling, please sit back, relax, grab some succulent, juicy, sensational and tasty prawns if you want, and enjoy it as we delve into the story of the Hotbox Saint herself. Something that's flown under the radar heavily is something that I found out in the comments last week. It actually turns out that Romania, Saint of the Bud, is seen originally in the story trailer for Shadow the Erdtree, and at first glance it might seem really obscure, but there are so many details in this one image that confirms it. For starters, the weapon she's holding in that burning place is the same one she uses in the boss fight and we can get for her remembrance. What goes towards this theory even more is the fact that in the weapon's item description it talks about how Romania, inside a burning church, held a scarlet bloom blossom, and that is what this weapon became. And what does she just so happen to be standing in the trailer? Well, a burning place. We can't really make out the details of a church, but it's not too far-fetched to think that's where she is. Something that adds on to this even further is the fact in her boss fight in the Saint of the Bud church, which we fight her in, we can actually see it's got no roof, and these little patches along the church are actually in fact filled in and patched together with the Scarlet Rot. I believe these patches may be hiding the blemishes left by the fire. Now you might be wondering, hey wait a minute Gecko, isn't the Scarlet Rot this evil bastard thing that just corrupts and kills everything? But I actually want to propose a theory that in my opinion makes quite a lot of sense. I believe the Scarlet Rot, like the fire inside of Izalith in Dark Souls 1, is in fact life. It may be grotesque and malformed at times, but it is still life. The pests, for example, are a civilization based on the Scarlet Rot. They are consumed by it, they are born of the Scarlet Rot, and yet they make incantations of faith. This to me does not sound like a civilization or group that is devoid of thought and reason. It's a civilization founded on it, founded on the Scarlet Rot. Something I find very, very interesting is the fact that the crusade and everything to do with Romania happened a long time before Melania's bloom, before she infected Caelid. So that means this Church of the Bud is pre-crusade, it is pre-Melania, and that makes so much sense, especially considering we know the Scarlet Rot Outer God has been sealed before by a certain blue dancer. And speaking of sealed shit, behind Romania's boss fight is a little sealed tree which is hiding the Divine Gate. This sort of area in Rao Ruins seems to be heavily coated in sealing magic, and it just so happens the Scarlet Rot is here. I definitely think there is some correlation to the Shadow Realm and the Blue Dancer. It would also explain why we know hardly anything about him. If he's not from this realm and he's actually from the Shadow Realm, in my opinion it makes a hell of a lot more sense why we know jack shit about him. The next point, I'm going to be completely honest with you, makes me think From Software has revived H.P. Lovecraft and made him into Frankenstein's monster. Just revived his ass and he's just writing for From Software, because this is straight out of his notebook. He'd be having the best wet dream ever if you could see this. If you look at her inside the trailer, you can actually see she's a normal ass human, and yet when we fight her, she's got a whole ass centipede and scorpion attached to her ass. And at first glance it seems really fucking weird, and it is really fucking weird and a bit confusing. But I think the answer has been here all along, and I don't mean that in a clickbaity sense, I genuinely mean it. Inside the base game of Elden Ring, we find out about the Scorpion Stinger dagger. This dagger is said to be made from a great scorpion's tail. It also says it's made from a relic of a sealed outer god, and the fact it also does Scarlet Rot build-up makes it pretty obvious that this dagger is part of some physical form of an outer god, more specifically the Scarlet Rot outer god. Now that there is a connection between scorpions and the Scarlet Rot, if we look at Romania, is it just me, or does the scorpion stinger dagger not look super similar to the legs on the scorpion and on the centipede side? Not to mention its actual two stingers. The outer god of the Scarlet Rot seems to have took on this form, this giant scorpion, and communed with those around it, enough so that it was sealed. Does anyone else find it a bit odd that Romania just so happens to have a scorpion and a centipede attached to her body, seemingly melded together like it was grafted? Elden Ring has a lot of lore regarding the fusing of beings, whether that be through grafting or like emperyans and gods. I believe that Romania fused with this centipede and scorpion being, also known as a certain sealed outer god of rot. Now, whether or not this being that is attached to Romania is in fact the physical body that we see from the scorpion stinger dagger is unknown. We can't really know. Considering the different colour palette, I'm leaning towards the possibility that maybe it's not, and instead, when that body was sealed, this new form was created in the form of Romania. This timeline would also make sense considering when Melania was a child, way before her bloom, the Scarlet Rot outer god had already been sealed. Something that I find really interesting as well, and leads credence to the fact that he could create a new form, is the fact that Melania is cursed post-sealing, so if it's not got any influence after being sealed, it wouldn't be able to do that, and yet it can. So I don't think it's too far-fetched for them to create a new physical form. Something I find really interesting is the fact that this makes so much more sense than you might think. For if you look at the bodies that are attached to Romania, you'll see that they have all these leg protrusions, a shit ton of them, even on the scorpion side. Weird protrusions and a shit ton of legs and arms are something we see also on the pests which are born of the Scarlet Rot. Now, is it so far-fetched to think that if this scorpion, or something related to it, is the Scarlet Rot outer god, is it so far-fetched to think that the Scarlet Rot outer god would create servants and subordinates that look exactly like it, and the pests are just that? This is just further proof, in my opinion, that this giant scorpion is in fact the Scarlet Rot outer god in this new physical form, within the scorpion stinger and in Romania. Something I find really beautiful about Romania and her counterparts attached to her body is the fact that she is at peace with it. Their attacks are coordinated, they work together, they are a team, they are harmonious, they have harmonised perfectly together. And unlike Melania, she does not scorn her rot, she does not hate it, instead she embraces it. Just like Quelaag, no, not that Quelaag, the Quelaag from Dark Souls 1. It's a lot of similarities, and honestly, the whole Scarlet Rot and Islith just seems to be like fused together like some shaman. On the topic of shaman, I actually do believe that Romania is a shaman herself. Romania is able to fuse with another being, something that is a power only shamans have. In my eyes, there's no other possible way that Romania could have fused with this being without that power. She has seemingly fully fused with this being, even in taking on properties from this being. She genuinely looks like she's taken on different aspects of this giant scorpion and centipede and became it. I mean, look at the bloody rubies in her chest, look at how her body twists and curves. It looks like she's genuinely a part of this being, but we know at one point in time she wasn't. I repeat, this is something that only shamans can do, something only the Newman can do. What I find really interesting about this is if she is a Newman, why on earth do we find out in the story trailer that Mesmer's crusade targeted Romania and her people? This to me gives one impression that I think makes the most sense, and that is that Romania and her group of shaman rebelled against Marika, that they survived the purge and the massacres upon their people, but did not follow Marika, and so were sent to be crushed by her son. This honestly paints a lot more darker image of the crusade. It was not just against the Hornsent, it was also against the traitorous ones of his own people. And I'm going to bet that they didn't deserve it. Romania is a kind and caring person inside of the Land of Shadows. We know that after Melania's Scarlet Bloom happened, and she abandoned her children of Rot, she came along and cared for them, nurtured them. It very much seems like those butterflies we are told that she soothed became wings upon her very own body. She gained the power of the butterflies of Rot, something Malenia had forsaken. Not to mention the countless pests which have joined Romania's side, changing their colours unintentionally. Perhaps that change in colour was a side effect of joining Romania, as that colour palette is the exact same of Romania's body and the body of the centipede and scorpion. An alternative to that though, considering we do see pests inside the Land of Shadows without this colour palette, is the exposure to this direct concentrated Scarlet Rot might dye their skins this colour. Romania tries to help so many people. She is a soothing saint of the Scarlet Rot, a saint which upholds the nature of the Scarlet Rot. I find it really ironic that the Hornsent who persecuted the Shaman wanted to make the Shaman into saints. They planned to do this by sticking them in jars, fusing them together, confined. Yet Romania became a saint once she was free and she fused willingly. It's not a really major point, but I did think it was ironic that the Hornsent were trying to make saints the direct opposite way of how saints actually came about. We perceive beauty and well-being as something by our standards, and by the Scarlet Rot standards, that is what its beauty is. That is what its life is. There is only a few examples of the Scarlet Rot fully consuming the mind. The pests are completely consumed by the Scarlet Rot, and yet they are still up and running. They still culture civilization. Another example being the Clean Rot Knights. Some of them have been afflicted for possibly hundreds upon hundreds of years, and yet they never die. Perhaps in part due to the unalloyed gold. But maybe this unalloyed gold doesn't do as much as Miquella thinks, and the reason why they aren't dying is because the Scarlet Rot isn't as evil or fatality causing as people seem to suggest inside the lands between. Discussing Caelid, I know there is a lot of people there that have lost their minds, that are in pain, but it's important to remember a lot of that comes from Melania. Perhaps there are other things that are mixing with the Scarlet Rot to cause this. Kind of like, think of it like blood. Blood's good for us, blood is in our bodies, and yet if we have tainted blood, we get very, very, very ill, and it's a very, very bad thing. I think the Scarlet Rot might be like that. Something I did want to quickly mention, if you look on the boss arena floor, you'll see all these buds and blossoms. These buds and blossoms are located all around Romania's domain, within the Rao ruins, and of course her church. What I find really interesting is we know from item descriptions that her glaive was made from a bud. It seems that her bud that she picked long ago grew and grew until it grew into this glaive. Perhaps the picking of these buds and turning them into weapons was a part of their practice and religion. She is a saint after all, and saints are typically associated with religion. If you did enjoy the video, please consider leaving a like and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. I wanted to quickly say thank you so fucking much. We hit 7,000 subscribers recently, and it honestly means the world to me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. I'm not going to try and hold you any longer, as these intros tend to ramble. So, please, don't you dare go hollow, and may you find your worth in the waking world. Goodbye everyone.